Going to be joined now by Sir John Curtice, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde and a polling expert. Hello, Sir John. So what are the polls telling us?
Well, we've now had 4 opinion polls that have been conducted wholly or mostly since last Friday's fiscal event. On average, they put the Labour Party 15 points ahead by 45 to 30. That compares with an average Labour lead of 9 points in the polls conducted immediately before last Friday. So 2 points follow. One is the government was already in a relatively poor electoral position before Friday's event. There was virtually no sign of any bounce for the Conservatives in the wake of Liz Truss's accession to the Conservative leadership and the keys of 10 Downing Street. But secondly, so far at least, the polls indicate that the public have reacted against the financial statement. And just bear in mind that quite a lot of this polling was done before the events of the last couple of days, whereby we've seen the financial markets react adversely. And one possibility is that the public will take their cue from that and maybe move even further away. But to give you some idea, I mean, Liam's just been talking about the 45p tax rate. Well, one of the questions that YouGov have asked specifically about the budget, was it fair or unfair? 3 times as many people said it was unfair than fair. Even 2019 Conservative voters are inclined to that view. Now, YouGov have asked that particular question on about most recent fiscal statements, and this is the statement that by far is judged to have been most likely to be unfair. And yes, you've also put up something here from YouGov this morning, or from yesterday, asking people about the ability of the parties to deal with various things. The standout one from that is that the Labour Party is reckoned now to be about twice as likely as the Conservatives to deliver economic growth. And of course, it's economic growth that the Conservatives are saying this statement is going to deliver, although, of course, a lot of Labour's conference was also about its plans for economic growth, primarily through generating what they called a green economy. Now, to give you some contrast, there's a different polling company and it's a different question, so a number of caveats. But when Ipsos Mori asked people last week who do they thought could best deliver economic growth, the Conservatives were clearly ahead. So that may be an indication, and I emphasize may, of the way in which the financial statement and the reaction have had an adverse impact on the Conservatives' reputation for economic competence. And of course, we know that's a crucial attribute that a party needs to have if it's going to win a general election.
Yes, it's hardly surprising after the past few days and the reaction in the markets that the Tories are now polling much below the Labour Party. It's also very interesting looking at that polling that was just up on the screen that the Tories are now only winning when it comes to making Brexit a success, and that's only by a few percentage points. That's just at the bottom there. That's the only one where Liz Truss as Prime Minister is leading. However, we are at the very beginning of a new administration. We've got about 2 years till the next general election. With your historical knowledge, is this very much a case of wait and see? This won't dictate what happens at the next general election?
Well, the $64,000 question is whether or not this will end up being regarded by the public as a fiscal stroke economic crisis on a similar scale to the financial crash of 2008 to 9, and perhaps above all, the ERM crisis of 1992. Now, in the wake of the ERM crisis, the UK economy grew. The economy had one of its best spells, which then continued under New Labour. But that sight of the government having to submit to the judgment of the markets that the UK could not remain inside the exchange rate market at the level at which the pound was then pegged, just destroyed the Conservatives' reputation for economic competence. Now, one thing I can tell you is that so far the immediate damage to the Conservatives' position in the polls relative to Labour that I've already just quoted to you, basically a 6-point increase in Labour's lead, is not that far short of the immediate impact of the ERM crisis. Now, that doesn't prove that there's an analogy between the two, but certainly bear in mind that if governments do preside over economic and financial crises, even if they're not necessarily their fault, which arguably was true of Labour in 2008 to 9. They find it very, very difficult to escape the consequences at the electoral ballot box at the next election. Now, of course, the government will reply quite reasonably, we are going to pursue growth, we're going to achieve growth. And indeed, if the government does achieve growth, maybe the events of these few days will be forgotten. But there is a risk that there will be a feeling amongst the public that, as Sir Starmer put it, that this government has lost control of the economy. That's the impression this government badly needs to avoid.